Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Play by Play, the daily wrestling podcast. We're the best wrestling podcast out there. I am your host, Atif Nawaz, and with me, as always, is the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Arman Kirmani.
I don't know about myth, but we're definitely the best goddamn wrestling podcast out there, as you said.
Got to get them the right way around.
I know, man. It's just, always the start of this podcast, I don't know what happens. I get too excited and my words start going up and down. But I've got one thing going for me today. My swig of milk for the working man.
Swig of milk for the working man. Shout out, of course, to the wonderful Stone Cold Steve Austin, the greatest of all time, for me, certainly.
Hey, anyway, man, that was a shout out to the working man. I don't know about you.
The working man, of course, as well. It's a great catchphrase. Steve Austin has a bunch of great catchphrases. Anyway, on today's show, it's going to be fun. We just had some breaking news about Kevin Nash. We're going to be talking about Raw Reunion next week and the implications for that show now that Kevin Nash is not going to be there owing to his arrest that happened a week or so ago. Him and his son were, of course, arrested. We'll have more on that news story. Also, we're going to be talking about Bray Wyatt, where we see him going for the rest of the year. What's next for Bray Wyatt? How do they capitalize on this huge push that he's been getting? We're going to be talking about the big star in WWE, that is John Cena, the incumbent star. What's he going to be doing at WrestleMania, especially if he doesn't win this match at the Royal Rumble, which the way it's being booked currently doesn't seem to be the case. And lastly, but certainly not least, as suggested by one of our listeners, Mr. MD Rahman. Thank you for commenting, Mr. MD Rahman. He said he would like us to talk about the relationship between death and WWE, specifically WWE superstars who over the years have passed away, sadly. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more as well. So we've got a great show. Let's kick off right at the top with a breaking story. Arman, Kevin Nash will no longer be at Raw next week. Were you excited about seeing Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, and the Nature Boy Ric Flair at Monday Night Raw?
Well, do you know what it is? I don't think I was very excited. I'm never too excited to see the legends from my era showing up on Raw, out of shape, white hair, can't wrestle. So no, I wasn't very excited. Well, hang on, let me finish my point. With the WWE network, one of the great things is I can now watch them at their peak, in their prime, relive some of their best moments. I don't really like seeing them at this old age. I don't think I want to see them not as superstars. I don't think I want to see them out of shape. I don't want to see them with injuries and life-threatening illnesses. And I respect them, and the Hall of Fame is a perfect place to see them.
Yeah.
But to see them, next to a Kofi Kingston, and where Kofi Kingston was going to be jumping up and down and doing cartwheels all over the place, and then seeing Bret Hart limping into the ring with sort of, the scars of his career. I don't want to see my legend Bret Hart like that. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. They did this segment a while back before the John Cena and Randy Orton match to unify the World Heavyweight Championship and the WWE Championship. And they brought in former world champions. And what that meant was they had Bret Hart in the same ring and being associated with Jack Swagger, which just doesn't work on any level. I mean, Bret Hart was the leader of the new generation. He was a star.
I remember
Jack Swagger's not, he's just not there.
No, and I remember Shawn Michaels being in that same ring on that same night and seeing Shawn and Bret a shadow of themselves from their careers when they were real champions. I don't want to see that. There was also a segment when they did, was it Hulk Hogan's birthday, where all these superstars came in and then Brock came and tried to scare them all. What the hell is going on? Yeah. I do not want to see Brock Lesnar trying to scare Hulk Hogan and Bret Hart and all these Ric Flair and all these sort of legends. I mean, I think there were even older names there. It's just not in good taste. The first thing is, it's sad to see whatever's happening with Kevin Nash, and I hope he can sort out his personal life and get through this difficult time and tricky time. But the truth of the matter is, it was a nice surprise to see him come in and have a match at the Rumble when he did, and it was done to good effect.
A couple of years ago now.
They're sort of overdoing it a bit. Unless he's going to have a proper program, be part of proper storylines. Big Daddy Cool is the way I want to remember him, not as a Big Daddy Fool, which he looks like right now.
Big Daddy Fool. When you think about it, just to back up your point there, I mean, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had Edge, who was one of the greats, the modern greats, you would have to say, and he's been completely bullied by Seth Rollins. So sure, he's an up-and-coming heel, probably the best heel in WWE today, but still, I don't want to see a legend like Edge being bullied, and the emphasis isn't on the fact that this guy won the World Heavyweight Championship countless times and won all the titles and was a legend that headlined pay-per-views. The emphasis was on this guy being like a frail, weak man, one bump away from being paralyzed for life. And as you say, it takes the shine off him completely.
No, I just don't think that I want to see Edge in that position. And I also think that it's sad to see that the WWE can't come up with enough creative booking that they need to bury their own or use legendary wrestlers to try and put over some of these new guys. I understand that there's a passing of the torch. I understand that the new guys need to replace the old guys, and I'm cool with that. But what I don't want to see is the legacy of my heroes being ruined by non-talented up-and-coming wrestlers, which, you know, let's face it, I'm not saying Seth Rollins isn't talented, but where is he going to be in 5 years if he has a bad run for the next 2 years, the way WWE booking's going?
We
so there's no guarantees.
Level now.
No, there's no,
and this is the thing. But having said that, and you're absolutely right, I think legends are overused on television by WWE. They have too many of them floating around too often. The Raw reunion, the old school Raw once a year is actually quite a nice concept. I quite like that. That's a really good idea. But once a year, it works because it's only done once a year. If they do that on a regular basis, keep bringing back legends willy-nilly, it takes the shine off it completely. Having said that, though, I did mark out last year, man. Was it last year or the year before, when Razor Ramon went into the Hall of Fame and he comes out with his iconic "Hey yo"?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the Hall of Fame is the right place because that is an environment, an evening, an event dedicated to the legacy of these wrestlers where you relive their past, you see their following. To see them on a 3-hour free episode of Raw where they're going to get buried by Seth Rollins and a headstomp is not the place to see them.
Absolutely. So,
Edge is a Hall of Famer. And he's won the Rumble less than, I think, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
He's main evented at Mania over the last 5 years. So, you know, I understand his career was cut short, but this is just...
Tragically.
It's just, yeah.
So I'm with you on this. I think legends it should be used more sparingly on television. The emphasis should be on your current talent. And if you can occasionally use older talent to put them over, that's great. But I don't think it's very effective at the moment, and they're being overused for sure. On the Kevin Nash issues, it's sad to see that he won't be able to make Raw, despite our opinions, that he won't be able to make Raw because of his personal issue. In fact, his WWE Legends contract has been suspended.
I've got a good fact for you here. I think the Hall of Fame, where Shawn Michaels was inducted, was the first time the entire clique was in the same place since the curtain call incident.
Well, what about that time where DX opened Raw? I think it was the 1000th episode of Raw or something, and all of DX were there. Was that before or after?
I think that might have been just after.
It might have been just after, but that was a memorable segment as well. Even though I've never really been a fan of D-Generation X, but that was a cool segment.
Well, I tell you what. This is a big thing that you just said here, right? You can't just get away with making these loose statements.
But hey, listen.
One second.
Overrated rip-off of the NWO.
One second. Let's talk about this, all right? This wasn't scheduled, but now that you put it up, I can't let you get away.
Well, go on. What's your point?
All right. The point is this. Okay, we had the clique, and we had the NWO that was forming in WCW. Yeah, and it made waves. Yeah, we all know that. White hot, great. But then when WWE countered with Michaels and Hunter and DX, which obviously came out as a result of the change in attitudes of the viewers, I accept that. But you've got to admit that the NWO became stale. It became overpopulated with far too many members. And DX has a legacy, and it's pure because its original members or the actual core of the team wasn't diluted by having every single person in the roster putting on a DX shirt. I mean, eventually, I think, you know, even Michael joined the NWO when we got to WWE days. Yeah. But, you know, the legacy of DX is stronger than the legacy of NWO. And there's no doubt about that.
That's because they're intrinsically linked to the legacy of WCW and WWE, you know, and DX will always be associated with that win. But DX, for me, is always given too much credit for that win that WWE got overall, because that was a team effort, probably. That was about your Mankind's, your Rocks, your Steve Austin's, your Undercard, your Hardcore title. Sure, DX was in the mix, but even now when I watch those
DX was not in the mix. It was the leader in the.
I don't think so. I disagree. Steve Austin was the leader.
No,
Mankind pulled the big segment.
Austin. Remember, you've got to understand this, right? DX was actually it was formed in '97, but it actually came out with the music and the theme the night after Montreal. You might remember, right? So Austin, I didn't actually get the belt until '98, 3 and 4 months later, and he was running hot, but he wasn't the main. DX had already started their antics in mid '97 and led up to Montreal. So I disagree with you to say that Austin and DX and The Rock. This is why it was called the Attitude Era, because they were all antagonists, they were all heels, and they were all hot. And so,
Mankind and the Hardcore title and everything else.
Of course. But DX,
and the Divas,
and don't forget, DX came out of not only what was going on at WCW, but the fact that the clique were running the show in '97. They had the clique South, and you had the clique North, and you had all four of them running the show, and you know,
click,
and that was the power that they had.
Click? It's click.
Well, it's I don't know how you pronounce it. The click, whatever. The way you spell it can be different, but the point is this, right? That DX has a much stronger legacy. And I just want to say one other thing. That the NWO and the Click made the NWO, right? They formed it.
Hulk Hogan made the NWO.
Well, Hulk Hogan formed it, but eventually he just piggybacked off of the hot heat that was
Kevin Nash,
and Razor Ramon. And what I want to say is that all of these stars were actually WWE guys, right? And the bottom line is this, that WCW never ever had an identity of their own, and the NWO started and its roots were based in WWE guys coming over and taking over the WCW. That was the angle that they started, and that was what formed into the NWO. The point I'm trying to make is, even in terms of branding, the NWO had a strong WWF feel about it. It was a very strong WWF feel. These were the outsiders. These were the people, the core from the WWF that went there and then took over as the New World Order. You cannot separate the NWO legacy and take that away from WWF, because all of these characters, all of these leaders are intrinsically linked to history in WWE.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is DX is overrated. People talk about DX being at the front of the chart. Sure, they had all those segments, but you got to remember, Raw never beat Nitro until after WrestleMania when Steve Austin won the world title. It was after DX had become that secondary thing. The biggest segment that popped for Raw was Mankind and The Rock and This Is Your Life. It wasn't the DX comedy or the DX adult humor. They didn't pull the kind of ratings. They get so much credit for WWE's victory in the Attitude Era. I don't like it. I didn't like their recent run as well. They released a new DVD, the Attitude, the Last Stand or whatever it was with Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and they were just pointless segments designed to sell glow sticks. I never liked DX, overrated. If the boss wasn't involved, it would never have got the kind of push it did. There's so many other factors that deserve much more credit for WWE eventually taking over from WCW. I agree with you that the DX was probably managed better than the WWE. It was certainly managed better than, the New World Order, I beg your pardon, the NWO, because the NWO, as you said, was diluted over time. It had that cool factor when it kicked off, but over time, the T-shirts were the hottest selling thing in wrestling until taken over by, not DX, Stone Cold Steve Austin. So on all these factors, I mean, DX is fine. I'm not saying it's insignificant, but I definitely think it's overrated. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Can we move on?
Just two things. No, I have to address this point. It's a crucial thing. We will move on very shortly. But part of what you're saying is true, that DX didn't get off to as strong a start as maybe the NWO did. But that's also because the NWO had first mover advantage. But there are two key things. The clique got separated. The clique, whatever you want to call it, it got separated, and as a result, Michaels lost a lot of momentum for his group. The second thing is that Michaels himself got injured halfway through his run in DX, which meant that they had to change leader halfway through, and Michaels was also going through his demons at that time. So DX was kind of such a strong thing that it survived a change of leadership in the middle as well. It even brought in the New Age Outlaws at that time. They did a great job, and they also did the coup and brought the X-Pac back, who'd already jumped ship.
And China for a while, and Rick Rude.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, this is the thing that
I think we should put it out to our listeners.
Yeah.
I think that we need a separate episode.
Is DX overrated?
No. DX or NWO? For me,
that's
it's
not
all
the
about
question.
DX.
That's not what I said. I said DX is overrated.
Well, DX is not overrated. It got diluted in its 2007 sort of form, and I agree with you.
Well, so did the NWO, but I'm not advocating the NWO. I just think NWO at its hottest was far better and far more valuable than DX at its hottest.
No,
that's my point. Well, I mean, if you let's let the viewers chime in. Let's listeners chime in. If you've got a view on that, make sure you guys tweet us at PlayByPlay123. You can email us at questions@playbyplay123.co.uk. We're not going to agree. Let's have some of your points as well. And on the subject of viewers, listeners' points, of course, Imdi Rahman, of course, who asked us the question about death and WWE. So one of the things in the Attitude Era that I think a lot of people still remember to this day, I certainly do, is when Owen Hart tragically passed away. Of course, not long around about the same time, the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith passed away as well. Brian Pillman passed away very young. This countless wrestlers, Macho Man Randy Savage, Mr. Perfect. So a lot of this is down to, I mean, over the years, wrestling pundits have attributed this to the lifestyle of wrestlers. They're running around a lot. They're messing around with drugs and drinking too much, or not sleeping properly, getting depressed. And I don't even want to touch Chris Benoit, but I mean, we all know what happened there as well. So do you think the lifestyle of a WWE superstar, maybe not so much now, but certainly during the Attitude Era, wasn't conducive to a healthy frame of mind?
Yes, and I think that's just part and parcel of the nature of the industry. And in terms of to make a wrestling promotion viable, you need to be having shows in different towns, sometimes working twice a day, sometimes working 6 days a night. It's very, very hard. You're a performer, I'm a performer, right? And at the end of the day, if we need to get people to listen to our product, even if it's a wrestling podcast, it's challenging. And these guys need to go out, sell tickets every night.
And take physical bumps as well.
And then on top of that, go through the injuries. And I think there's a mental side to it, which often gets ignored, which is being away from your family at such a young age, being away from your children, being away from your girlfriend, your wife, even your parents, if they're slightly younger wrestlers. And I think all of that, and don't forget, it's tough to be educated in that environment. I mean, you're being educated in your craft, but you're not being educated in the world and its problems and some of the negatives, and that kind of a lifestyle with popularity and women and stuff. And I think for young minds,
money, don't forget the money.
And of course, and now they're making very, very good money, which wrestlers at that time were not even making.
Well, wrestlers. I mean, if we're talking about the NWO, for example, when if you read Hogan's books or any of the NWO members' books, they talk about being out on the town almost every night, rubbing shoulders with celebrities, and with that kind of attitude, that kind of lifestyle, it often brings all these vices like drugs to the table. It's sad. What I will say though, I think WWE, we don't commend them enough for the efforts they make to counter these things. I know WWE personally paid for X-Pac's rehab. He was addicted to drugs and alcohol at one point in his life, tried to kill himself.
Scott Hall's?
Scott Hall's rehab as well. Diamond Dallas Page deserves so much credit for Jake the Snake and Scott Hall. Their recovery had so much to do with Diamond Dallas Page. But I like that WWE has this wellness program which tests wrestlers for steroids and all sorts of things. I know that people are dubious about the wellness program, but it's there. It's better than nothing. And also nowadays, I think they've moderated the schedule a little bit more as well to make sure these incidents or the mental trauma is kind of minimized, which I really like. In fact, I think I was listening to a podcast recently. It was Alberto Del Rio. In fact, it was his shoot interview with RF Media, where he talked about being on the road for a 30-day loop. And John Laurinaitis, who was the head of talent relations at the time, spotted that he was going mad. And he couldn't take him off the road because he was booked, but he flew in his entire family on his own dime to be with him, to keep him in a positive frame of mind. So WWE, for all the criticism they get, I think they make a greater effort now to look after their wrestlers.
Well, I think they have to be honest. I mean, I want to give the company credit. It's why we are so passionate about wrestling. It's made a big impact on our lives, our personalities, our entertainment. But at the same time, as a public company, they need to look after their performers. To have another Owen Hart incident or have another Chris Benoit incident is very damaging to their brand. It's very damaging to overall profitability. And I don't want to be skeptical here, but I feel aside from the responsibility that they have, they've almost got no choice now but to help out some of their legends and legacies, because in the world of social media, things don't stay hidden. And
it's just moral responsibility as well. I mean, like that was horrible. I would remember being completely brokenhearted about the Chris Benoit incident. Owen Hart was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up. I was talking about WWE at the time. I watched the Hart Foundation. I remember watching Owen Hart from his days in the New Foundation with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, all the way through all of his phases as characters. And everybody talks about Owen Hart so positively, like he was such a wonderful guy. He was one of the few people that was faithful to his partner as well. Which people in his own family weren't occasionally, according to various books, but we won't go there. I mean, it was tragic. So I think it's a good thing that WWE makes an effort to prevent more of these tragedies happening, whether they have to or they don't. It's a good thing that they do. I know CM Punk brought up several issues recently, so we can mention his interview. He talked about having a staph infection, which went undiagnosed for a very long time. And in his own words, he went to see AJ Lee, his now wife's doctor, who informed him that he could have died in the ring again. So I think there's still lessons to be learned for the WWE.
Well, as much as I'd love to agree with what Punk has to say, I just can't take everything he's saying seriously. That's probably for a different podcast.
Sure.
He's got his own agenda, and I've got my views on that. But don't want to start making claims where I sort of buy everything that he says and what his doctors and his wife's doctors and everyone want to say. But at the same time, I think there's a wider point, and Indy's question to us on Twitter and then sort of his request to discuss this is I want to talk about a little bit on the sort of impact on the viewers, and take me back to the time when you were watching the pay-per-view or the next night on Raw, and how are you feeling at that young age when you learn that somebody you've been watching your whole childhood is dead?
Over the edge, I remember that.
Because the other thing that I want to address here is, you've got to understand, especially in the during the kayfabe era, it was difficult to know what was real and wasn't.
Yeah,
real.
yeah. Well, that's it. That's what I was just going to say. My first reaction was,
I mean,
is this an angle? If it is, it's in terrible taste.
And I'm pretty sure that Chris Benoit's death had to cut short an angle when McMahon had been blown up in a car.
That's right. So the death of McMahon.
So exactly. So what I'm trying to say is, and this is, I think, quite intriguing, even for children today who probably don't really understand kayfabe, non-kayfabe as much as we sort of are aware. But what do you think the impact on you as a viewer was when you thought, I'm watching the scripted show? I mean, part of all of us had to think at some point, is this part of the storyline?
Yeah, of course we did. Of course, I think everybody did at that point. I think most people watching were thinking, this is terrible. They should never have gone with this angle. Of course, it turned out that it was horrible news, and Jim Ross gave the news. I still remember actually the visual of Jim Ross giving the news, and there's fans behind Jim Ross at the announce desk, just like playing along with the show, like shouting and hooting, and I'm on TV and that kind of thing. And I bet they felt terrible afterwards. I bet they're the kind, nowadays, every time a fan is on Raw and captured in the camera, they'll take a screenshot and they'll put it on their Twitter, which is a cool thing. It's like, I was spotted at Monday Night Raw, I was on TV, I was the guy in the green shirt, and everybody likes that.
We did that once.
We did that once as well. Well, I dare say I've done it multiple times now. But the point is, like, those guys would probably never have done that when they realized what happened. And obviously at the time they didn't know it was part of the show. But yeah, I mean, there we have it. Make sure you guys get us your views on death and the WWE. It's a very interesting topic, and often a very somber one. Let's move on. A couple more things to talk about. We're running out of time. Let's talk about Bray Wyatt first of all now. Bray Wyatt's getting a mega push. He came into the WWE with the Wyatt family. Unique look, unique entrance, great entrance music. The fans have kind of got into it as well. Every time he comes out, the arena is blacked out, and you've got the sea of smartphone lights everywhere. Most recently, he's been put over by Dean Ambrose, who I thought had some credence, but hey, he was actually put over by Daniel Bryan at last year's Rumble. Sure, he ended up on the losing side of a rubber match with John Cena last year in 2014. But the future for me for Bray Wyatt is quite bright where I'm standing. How do you see Bray Wyatt being used, or how would you like to see Bray Wyatt used in 2015?
Well, first and foremost, I think this guy is extremely talented. He's had a very tough gimmick to try and get over, and he's gone over with the audience with a really good gimmick, but it's a tough one to play. I think it's not every person's sort of ability to try and cross over to a wider audience, especially as a heel, using such a dark character so quickly in their career. Mm-hmm. And I think he's done a really good job. He's actually done a good job in the ring as well. And I think the slightly disappointing thing for me sitting here in early 2015 is I don't think he's built upon the momentum that he's generated in the first 7 or 8 months. I feel his promos are starting to get boring. They're a bit too long. I kind of got the gist of them, and I understood what they were about in the beginning, but now they've given him more time to speak and eat into more of a 3-hour Raw time, which they need to finish somehow. But at the same time, I don't think he's interesting enough in what he's saying. I don't actually get the point half the time of what he's saying. Mm-hmm. And I think they're trying to use that as, well, that's the whole point. It's not the whole point. Any good promo, it can be whatever you want. I mean, even with the Warrior, you had no idea what he was saying, but you got the gist that I'm going to come and I'm going to beat you and I'm going to win the belt.
Of course.
I don't even get that. I've seen Bray Wyatt cut a promo, do a match, lose, and still smile. And I don't really understand what he's about, to be honest.
So he needs another dimension really at this point, doesn't he? Because he lost a stable, never addressed losing a stable. They never really did any kind of matches between them, nothing that was properly publicized. He still does a very similar promo style. He's got a unique ring style. I mean, I remember when he interfered in one of the events last year. I think it might have been Hell in a Cell, where he turned up at the last minute. Do you remember that incident with John Cena, where he brought out the kid, the really creepy kid, with the choir music, right? Whole world in his hands. I thought that was a really nice evolution of his gimmick. Sadly, they just kind of let that go by the wayside. They didn't make more of it. He needs more dynamic things like that. I think at the moment, they're letting him win matches, they're putting him over, but they're not really writing him anything to set him apart. Or maybe they're building him or saving him for a storyline.
You talked about those lights that the fans put out. I've actually noticed that those lights are getting not as bright every time.
You think so?
I mean, I saw them at Mania, and I've seen them now. And okay, fine. There's
bigger stadium.
Yeah, bigger stadium and about 4 times as many people and phones. But at the same time, I don't think he is as entertaining as he was. And also, the booking he's getting. I mean, he had that match, as you said, with Ambrose in the ambulance match, and it's sort of a pay-per-view match that they're putting on Raw, and it's coming out of nowhere.
I get it. It's a hook for the first Raw of the year and all that kind of thing.
I don't get it.
I didn't like it. I understand why they did it, but I don't like it.
I don't understand what they're doing with him, and he's going to get stale very quickly. It's not, and it's sad because I think he's an easy guy to book.
Yeah,
it's very easy to book wrestlers with supernatural sort of themes. Taker's had amazing. Mick Foley, you can put them in with anyone more or less, right? And this guy, I mean, I don't know if they're building him up for a Taker match at WrestleMania. That's kind of a match I think I'd like to see.
It feels pointless to me. What does he have to gain? What is he going to be, the 2 and 22, 21 and 2?
Well, look, I don't even know if they're going to even
21
continue.
and 2. It feels pointless. I don't think anything's to be gained.
I have no idea if they're going to continue.
And then he looks weaker than Brock Lesnar if he loses to the Taker. Anyway, let's move on to another man who's going to be booked at Mania.
1 second, just before that, I'm going to do it really quickly. Bray Wyatt for the Rumble. He's my second shout.
What? You can't have more than one. You got Rusev for the Rumble.
Rusev for the Rumble. That's my shout.
You're gonna have 30 people for the Rumble.
I'm saying, I think they might give the Rumble to him.
Okay, well that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I don't see it happening because I see a heel dynamic being set up in the World Championship.
I would love to see him in the main event. But
this is the point. So the other person we wanted to talk about, we'll talk about him very, very quickly now, is John Cena, right? We assume at this point he's not going to walk out of the Royal Rumble with the World Heavyweight Championship. I know you're a big fan. Where do you see him at WrestleMania? I mean, we talk about him potentially fighting Rusev at WrestleMania and being the first man to give him his clean defeat in the ring. That's what we imagined that Rusev's been built up for all year. Sans that one segment with The Rock, where The Rock buried him and Lana. I don't get the point of that at all. Anyway, so where do you see John Cena at WrestleMania, if not with Rusev?
Well, I'm generally concerned about Cena at the moment. I don't see him winning at the Rumble. I don't see him, therefore, in the championship main event at Mania. I want him to be up there, and I can see why he wouldn't be booked in the championship match. But at the same time, what I think I want for John Cena is a big it's a celebrity match, man. I want someone like a dream match again, but not with The Rock or something, and not for the title.
Sure.
But I don't want him putting over.
Would you go for a Hogan comeback match with Cena? Hogan Cena?
I'd go for it, but I'd rather go for Austin Cena.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
But can you imagine the crowd?
Oh God, it'd be crazy. I mean, John Cena would not have anybody like him at all.
But what an honor for John Cena.
It would be incredible. I'm sure he'd treat it as such as well. He's an honourable man, if nothing else. So that we can't take away from him. We'll talk more about John Cena in coming episodes as well. For now, we've got to tie up our business, which is, of course, let's start with the Dean of the Day Award, the Dean Douglas Award, which is going for a second time.
Mr. Abbott.
Mr. Abbott, Glenn Abbott. My God, he's unstoppable. He's won his second Dean Douglas Award. Can you give us the answer to yesterday's trivia question that you asked?
Well, I asked Eli and Jacob, my very memorable tag team in the WWE. I said, what was their name? What was their tag team's name in the WWE? And of course, the answer was
the Eli brothers.
No, the Blue Brothers.
The Blue Brothers. Sorry,
the Blue
Jacob
Brothers.
And Eli.
But it was the Blue Brothers without the E.
Without the E.
So yeah,
you made him tweet him again, didn't you?
Absolutely, well, it's the rule.
Well, you got it right. Okay, well done, Glenn. You got it.
Get the E out is what I said.
Get the E out. Love it. Okay, we're gonna put out today's Dean Douglas Award question. Okay, and it's my question today, and it's a very very easy one. I'm gonna say. Okay, in the history of WWE, the once prestigious Intercontinental title. Right, not to be confused with New Japan Pro Wrestling's actually prestigious Intercontinental title. So that was only once in its prestigious history was it held by two people at the same time. Tell me who those two people were. Which two people simultaneously held the Intercontinental title? That's the question. That's the Dean Douglas Award of the day. If you can get that, Arman, do you know the answer?
Of course I know the answer.
Of course you know the answer. You know everything. I tell you what. Just tell me your match of the day.
Well, my match of the day is a really, really memorable match from the 1994 Royal Rumble. This was the tag team match between the Hart Foundation, Bret and Owen, alongside the Quebecers, and it was memorable because of the ending of that match.
Of course, that was a classic match already, and it set in motion one of the most memorable feuds of somebody we've been talking about a lot today, Owen Hart. So yeah, well recommended. Royal Rumble 1994, Owen Hart and Bret the Hitman Hart against the Quebecers. Pierre and what was the other guy's name? What was it? Oh,
Jean-Claude.
Jacques and Pierre, of course. They couldn't think of any other French names. God bless them. Anyway, guys, this has been the episode 7 that brings it nicely to a close. And this is the Daily Wrestling Podcast, Play by Play, with myself and Arman. Guys and girls, remember to follow us on Twitter, PlayByPlay123. Share this podcast with your friends. We think it's quite good. Do you think it's good? Make sure you share your thoughts with us as well. You can email us questions at playbyplay123.co.uk, and please like our page on Facebook, Play by Play Wrestling. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a fun episode. We'll be back tomorrow with another broadcast of Play by Play. Until then, from myself, Atif, from Iran, it's
Rusev for the Rumble. Goodbye.